Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Contractor Evolution. This is your host, Benji. We all know the core KPIs we want our business to excel at. Dollars sold, dollars produced, gross profit, net profit, the list goes on. The only problem with these all-important metrics is that they are lagging indicators. We find out about their performance after the activity that drives them has already happened. So in other words, they tell us whether we've achieved the results we wanted, but they say little about the small wins and losses that led to them. And this is where leading indicators can be instrumental in helping you lead your team. So for example, if you tell your project managers to raise gross profit next quarter, they won't know how. But if you tell them to keep their materials expenses below 15% by following a more efficient ordering and purchasing process, and how by doing that, that keeps job costs down and GP up, they actually stand a pretty good chance. You see the difference? So today's conversation I'm excited about, it's with Coach Brayden Russell, and he is known in the Breakthrough Academy universe for helping entrepreneurs frame their goals correctly, turn lagging indicators into leading indicators, and distilling all of that into quarterly critical numbers that are actionable for the entire team. So without further ado, let's get started with Brayden.
You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting.
Coach Brayden, you're finally on the show, man. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, we're going to have a really interesting and important conversation about leading and lagging indicators, how to get better KPIs, how to set better goals, quarterly critical numbers, a bunch of really good stuff for your strategic planning and goal setting. But I think we need to start with some definitions here at the beginning. So just for the unfamiliar, what's a lagging indicator versus what is a leading indicator?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about talk about this because we use this a lot in coaching. So lagging indicators are output oriented, focused on things that have already happened. Leading indicators are input focused, focusing on things that are we're looking to the future for.
Now, a lot of business owners that we work with are only tracking lagging indicators. And I wonder if you have any comments as to why that is. Because there's a whole other lens to look at your numbers through, which we're going to get into today. But most people just miss it. And why do you think that issue comes up so much?
The simplest answer I can give is that it's just easier and they just don't know any better.
They've never been trained. They haven't been shown this way of looking at it.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And I think the classic information that we talk about is, gross profit, total sales, total revenue produced. These things, they're all lagging indicators. They happen at, we measure them after the fact. So I think it's just, it's easier. And I think, most people just don't know the difference.
With the businesses that you've worked with, and there have been many, what impact does cracking the leading indicator code have on the managers of that business, the leadership, and then the broader team and their results?
Has a really big impact. So we'll go through this a little bit more later, but when you start to shift the focus from the team more towards these leading indicator types, not all the time, but some of the times, what you do is you start to change the behaviors on the team because they're focusing on slightly different things. And the other thing that it does is it actually makes it easier to lead and influence people when you understand your business better and at a deeper level. So couple things there. It impacts the business's behavior, but it also makes it simpler and easier to lead your people.
Does the team seem to get it more? Is there a higher get it factor?
Mm-hmm. Well, and also the leader gets it too. So the people that I work with are the owners of the companies, and to teach them how to look at this, then they go and talk to their staff about it, and everybody involved gets to understand the business at a deeper level. But it starts with the leader up top.
We've got two really good kind of like analogies or stories to help paint this in. We've got like your door knocking story, and then we have the conveyor belt analogy. Which one do you want to do first?
We'll start with the conveyor belt. I think it'd be kind of
lay out the your business as a conveyor belt paradigm. I think this is a really helpful framework for people to think about this whole concept with.
Awesome. Yeah, I use this a lot. So if we put the business on a conveyor belt, so we have a lead coming in at the very top, goes through this conveyor belt, and then at the very end, it spits out, or at least we hope it spits out, net profit.
Yeah.
Right? This is just like a very simple business, and most businesses run like that. A potential customer comes in, the bottom spits out net profit. But we can break that down into different departments across the company, and this is where we get this conveyor belt example, but also on like a more kind of microscopic level. So macro, lead goes in, net profit comes out.
You're skipping some details. It's a very long conveyor belt.
It's a very long conveyor belt,
Yeah.
exactly. So to get more specific on this, we've got the marketing, then we've got sales, then we've got production, and then finance department. Now, you may not have those departments in your company right now, but it still flows through that.
Right.
Regardless.
You could have, if you're a smaller business, some of those could be like hybrids, like you've kind of mushed them together. It may not really exist yet. You're not set up so well to have sort of a team that does financials. So you may not think of it as purely in terms of those buckets yet, but your business is still doing those core functions. And as it grows, those divisions, let's call them, will become more substantial, more distinct, and more clear. So then, okay, top is lead. We begin with marketing and we end with finance. Take us through like the steps, the motions, the systems, everything that kind of like runs that whole factory.
Awesome. So when a lead comes in, it moves into the sales department, and the sales department takes that lead and they kind of do their song and dance with it. They go and visit with the customer, usually at their house. They provide them with an estimate. Then the sales team closes the deal. Mm-hmm. Sales team closes the deal. They pass that over into the production department. The production takes that closed deal and they do their song and dance, schedule the material drop off, depending on the type of work. They go to the house. They, if it's roofing, for example, they'll tear off the old roof, put on the new roof. And then the thing that they end with is a finished job, right? They pass that over to the finance department. The finance department goes, oh, sweet, a done job. We're going to invoice this. They collect the money, net profit at the end. You could also look at cash flow, EBITDA, all those different things. So that's kind of how it trickles through the different departments. And we're going to go more granular into each of those, but that's kind of one zoom in of those different levels. We'll go another couple zooms in, but that's kind of the next stage to look at.
Hey everyone, if you're an avid listener of this show, there is a very good chance that you know what it feels like to have an unprofitable year in business. It can be a dark place. Now, the simplest and biggest ROI financial control that you can put in place is an annual budget. And we've made a low-tech and easy-to-use budgeting tool that will work for any contracting business at any size. Stop being a financial freewheeler. Download it using the link in the description.
So now we can get into leading versus lagging indicators. So simply, we can start with like a sales example because it's kind of the easiest to kind of wrap your head around. If we zoom in on just the sales department, so let's assume we're like a huge company, 30, 50, $100 million, whatever you want, but there's one person, the sales manager or the director of sales, who runs all of sales. So all he cares about is sales. He handles everything from the qualified lead getting passed over to him from the marketing department. And then his job is to turn as many of those leads into as many sales as possible, right? So the leading indicator of success for that sales department, if he looks upstream, if you will, would be lead flow. It's coming from a different department, but that would be his leading indicator of success. If he doesn't have lead flow, he can't sell $50 million, $30 million, $5 million. He can't sell anything if he doesn't have lead flow. So he's looking upstream to see what the lead flow is, the quality of leads, the number of leads, those types of things. And then as it trickles through his department, it goes through these different steps. And that's when we get this spectrum from leading indicator to lagging indicator and kind of everything in between.
Can you give a few examples of like a leading and a lagging indicator for each of these divisions or departments?
Yeah. Exactly. So I'll start with sales because it's the simplest. The leading indicator in this case would be, the leads. Now, some leading indicators are within our control. Some leading indicators are not within our control. So if this is a sales company that I'm getting given leads from the marketing department, the number of leads are not really within my control because they're coming from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
If I am a sales department, but we do some door knocking, the leads might be a little bit more within my control, and that's when we can go into that example later. But the number of doors knocked, people that you're getting off the doorstep. You talked with Sam Taggart recently, so I'll go into that a little bit more. But some of these things might be more within our control. Some of these things might not really be within our control. So leading indicator on the sales side would be leads coming in, doors knocked, people off the doorstep. And then we go through this kind of spectrum and we get into a couple different types of metrics. We get into like lead conversion. So how many leads are you converting into an appointment? We get into like demo rate. The people that you're meeting with, are you giving them a demonstration? Are you providing them with an estimate? We've got the closing ratio. We've got lots of different things kind of in that spectrum. NSLI, net sale per lead issued. We've got a couple different things in that spectrum. And then the final piece is just total amount that we sold. So I got, a couple hundred leads. I sold, $10 million. And then in the middle would be all the spectrum. So go back to the beginning and we'll go through each of these different departments on the way down. So for marketing, the lagging indicator is leads
generated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is interesting because we just talked about that as a leading indicator on the sales side. So you can see how these actually start to interact with each other.
Cascades.
It cascades. It's like a little waterfall. It kind of comes down. So the leading indicator on the marketing side will be something a little bit more within their control that they're doing on a daily basis. This would be things like spend, like marketing dollars spent, where they're spending it, ROI. These types of things are a little bit more on the leading indicator of the marketing. So we got marketing, dollars spent, ROI, cost per lead, cost per acquisition. Those are kind of all a spectrum. Again, lagging indicator would be qualified leads coming through.
Yeah.
Sales department. We've got the qualified leads, and then we finish with the sales. The
production
department, we get into looking upstream again at the sales department. Now we're looking at the sales coming through. Something that the production, if I'm just the production manager and I'm looking upstream, depending on what the average job size is and how the company works, sometimes you'd be looking at the pipeline, right? So if this is like a large average job size, you're doing spec home building or you're doing like, custom home building or commercial construction or commercial roofing, that pipeline might be 6 to 12 months long because the average job size is much larger. So if I'm on the production side and I'm looking at what my pipeline looks like, that's really, really important because I'm using that to hire project managers, to find new sub crews. I'm using that information to go and run my department. So leading indicator on the production side would be looking upstream at what the sales department's doing. Some of the leading indicators on the production side that are a little bit more within their control are things like how many project managers do I have? How many sub crews do I have? Or how many in-house crews do I have? How many repair techs do I have? Like these types of things that would then interact with the ability to produce work. This is a bottleneck on my capacity. So these would all be leading indicators on my ability to produce revenue. Then the lagging indicator would be the revenue that's actually produced, invoices sent out. Finance department is just basically taking the completed jobs, invoicing them, and then producing the net profit. You'd be looking at cash flow.
The financial statements and the reporting associated with tracking the whole system. So this is like, there are a number of metaphors that would immediately pop into the brains of our listeners, and I think a lot of them do think about it this way already. A conveyor belt, an assembly line, a waterfall that cascades, a choo-choo train where, you've got each car is like loaded onto the back of the next car and it needs the pull from the car in front of it to pull it. There's a few different ways you can think about this. Choose the visual that you like the best. Why is it important to understand your own business in this exact way? And what happens if you don't understand this framework?
Simply put, it just makes it harder to lead people, in my opinion. Like this all kind of ties back to leadership and being able to influence people. When you understand your business at a really deep level and you understand and you can distill it down to simple ways to communicate with your team, it makes it easier to communicate like, hey, I just need you to do this thing. and it will produce that thing. If you just focus on that thing, which in this case is the lagging indicator, it makes it harder to do. If I put this in like an extreme example, if I say, hey, Benji, you're running a business, and let's assume that, I'm just your coach. I'm like, I just need you to increase your net profit from 500K to 800K. You're like, well, yeah, no, duh. Like, that's why I'm here, Brayden. Can you tell me how to do it? Like, if I just said that, you're like, that's not helping me at all. So if I just tell a sales guy, I just need you to sell $1 million. He's like, well, duh, that's what I'm trying to do the whole time. Can you give me any more information? If I tell the sales guy, hey, I need your closing ratio to go from 22% to be above 30%. That's what the entire business model is built on. Your closing ratio has to be above 30%. Then you'll sell $1 million. You're like, oh, I get it now. And this sounds obvious. This is like very, very simplistic, but the way you communicate these things to your people, it helps them tie these things together. You want your people to be experts on your business as well. And most business owners that I start working with at the beginning aren't even experts on their business themselves. So this helps the business owner to understand their business better, and then they can communicate that to their team, and their team starts to understand the business better.
I would even distill it more simply. I would say a lagging indicator is inactionable in the sense that it has already happened and you're looking at a result or a circumstance or a state of reality, which is sort of, it's done already. Like it's done already. A leading indicator is much more actionable because it's a signpost towards the activity that you need to carry out that's going to lead you to the lagging indicator that you want to see. So that's a really important distinction. Another way you could think about it would be the lagging indicator is what to do. Leading indicator is how to do it. And I can't believe how many business owners, and I'm going to chuck us under the bus here. Even at Breakthrough Academy, we do this a lot where we'll sort of sit around in a room and be like, well, we're behind on sales. We got to get ahead on sales. And it's like, bro, everyone can see the same spreadsheet. Like we're all aware. That's actually not helpful. What is helpful is like, what is the course of action? What is the activity? Where does the effort need to go to impact that lagging indicator for the next quarterly meeting or whatever? So I think that this is more common and more rampant than people think. And this is a really important thing to key into as a leader. Now I have a question for you. Are leading indicators sort of universal in the sense that there's 8 of them and you always track them? Or is it something that's quite unique from business to business, market to market, industry to industry? In other words, is it something you have to you download from, you just Google and you find out? Or is it something you have to kind of like learn about yourself and discover and then install?
It's pretty unique.
Right.
I would say the general idea is universal, but if it were simple, I would just be giving the same leading indicators out to every single person that I coach, and it's just not the case. Like, it's not possible. A really simple example is the one that I just gave. If your company doesn't knock doors, then number of doors knocked doesn't make sense as a leading indicator. Like the intricate ways that your company functions, what type of work you do, but also how the departments interact with each other and what each department does has a big impact on what a leading indicator could or couldn't be. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty, like, sure, there are some patterns, but like it's pretty specific.
Is it the case that this is a kind of a nut that business owners try to crack when they're a little bit more mature and sophisticated? And the reason I'm asking is you said something important. When you're still in that exploratory discovery phase as a business owner, which I think for someone really sophisticated, you can kind of get through that in 3 years. For many business owners, it's 5 to 10 years and sometimes even longer. There's a section where you're still figuring out how it is, how exactly you do what you do. Right. What exactly are the robots and the workers on the assembly line? To go back to your analogy, are we does our service and brand and team do better with like a heavy duty digital marketing approach, or are we like hardcore door knockers and ground game and business development? When it comes to production, are we all in-house, or do we actually sub half of the work out, or do we rely 100% on subbed out production? I could go through more examples. You get the idea. There's a number of things that you need to figure out who you are as a business and get the shape of things sort of settled on. It doesn't mean it's permanent and fixed and never changes, but there's like a critical mass, and it's sort of like when you put Jell-O in the fridge, there's like a point where it's like, okay, this is now like a thing. Like it's kind of come together and it's a thing, and the pieces click together. At that point, I'm kind of answering my own question here, but comment on it if you want. At that point, it really makes sense to figure out the leading indicators. Before then, is it too simplistic to say you just kind of have to try stuff to figure out what that right concoction is in the first place?
Yeah, you want to have some type of development already kind of happening in the business. And what we'll talk about later, which is what you're touching on here, is like how to know if you have a good critical number. And like the simplest way is like it's creating the behavior change that you're looking for.
Right.
Right.
That's a good definition of it. Now, you sort of first stumbled into this whole idea when you literally were knocking doors. And I think this is like a good piece to help tie this together. So just talk about the door knocking story and the first time you kind of keyed into leading versus lagging.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know what these things were called. So I definitely, I didn't call it this, but when I was door knocking, I got recruited down to Denver. And when I started at 19 years old, never knocked a door in my life, the formula, if you will, that they gave me was they said, hey, Brayden, if you knock 100 doors, you should make about a sale a day. And if you make a sale a day, you'll make like 100 and something sales in the summer, and you'll make, whatever it was, $25,000. And I was like, sweet, 19 years old, I can make 25 grand in the summer. That sounds pretty cool. And what I didn't realize at the time was that, that was the leading indicator. Like thinking back on it now, I'm like, hey, that's what they were talking to me about. The problem was I did 2 months, so half of my first summer focusing on this, knock 100 doors, knock 100 doors, knock 100 doors. And it was brutal. Anybody who's knocked doors, will attest to that. But focusing on that leading indicator made it especially brutal because it actually wasn't that valuable to knock on 100 doors a day. That doesn't actually equate to sales. It just equates to work, right?
In other words, they had got it wrong a little bit from a management perspective.
Totally. They had got it wrong. And what I changed it to in the second half of my first summer, I said, look, I'm terrible at this. I was really bad. I had like 15 sales in like half the summer. So I definitely, the formula wasn't working out for me. And I'm like, look, I can't really get much worse at this. Why don't I just try something else? I like talking to people. And I'm like, instead of spending 5 minutes with them, which is what they suggest, they said, you should make a sale in 5 minutes. I'm like, why don't I spend like half an hour or an hour with people and like see if they actually need, I was doing pest control. And I was like, what if I see if they actually need pest control?
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
What if I look around the house and just like looked with them and see if they actually have any pest issues? So instead of spending 5 minutes and like pressuring them into this, which didn't fit my values at all, I was like, why don't I just chat with them for a little bit, get to know them, get to know their family a little bit, see if they need any help. And then if they need it, then I will maybe be able to talk them into it because they'll actually need it. Like it'll be an easier sale. So I started doing that. And I started going from like basically 0s and 1s to like 2s and 3s. And I ended the second half of my first summer just like doing really well.
What was the exact thing, metric or activity that you keyed in on at that halfway point? If it wasn't 100 doors, what was it?
What I changed it to, and I didn't realize this exactly at the time, but what I had changed my leading indicator was getting people off of the doorstep, which is what Sam talked about a couple weeks ago. Obviously, he knows way more about this than I do. But what I noticed was when I could get somebody engaged with me enough to actually come off the doorstep into the driveway and like look at the whatever, wasp nests, ants, spiders, whatever it is, but they're off the doorstep now. Now they're in my domain and I'm the expert now. When I'm standing on their doorstep, they're just holding the door, they're just ready to slam it. So long story short, the leading indicator changed from knock 100 doors, and then I changed it to get 15 people off the doorstep or 20 people off the doorstep, but it was getting people off the doorstep versus knocking 100 doors. And those people were actually engaged with me. And then I had a significantly higher chance in selling them because they were talking to me in their driveway instead of just at the doorstep.
So that's a really, really great sort of like door-to-door sales story to help color in the fundamental point. But this idea exists for anything that you want to change in your business.
Yep.
If you want to get a higher rating on Google, you want a 4.8 with 200 reviews so that you come up easier on search and it's great social proof and et cetera, et cetera. There would be, you wouldn't just be like, hey guys, we want more 5-star reviews. There would be an activity, there would be emotion, there would be something that you can track with your crews or your PMs. Maybe sales is involved to some degree that is going to lead you to that final result. And you listeners will have to extrapolate, with the different options and variants that are available to you. And I think through trial and error, eventually find out, which leading indicator connects with which lagging indicator. This is a good follow-up question if we're done with that story. If someone is, if you're working with someone in Breakthrough Academy, how do you coach them to find their own unique leading indicators?
So in our strategic plan and what we call the master business plan, I set my guys up to have a sales goal, a production goal, and then a finance goal each quarter. So on the annual goal, we've got the sales goal, the revenue produced goal, the gross profit goal, and the net profit goal. And then on the quarter-to-quarter basis, we just have 3. We kind of, we distill it down a little bit. We've got sales, revenue produced, and then some type of finance number. It could be collections, AR, whatever it is. But we've got sales, revenue produced, and a finance goal. How I actually coach through this is, let's use a real-life example. We want to do $1 million in sales, $800K in revenue produced, maybe it's Q1 in a cold state, and our gross profit we want to keep above 35%. Let's use those as our just Q1 targets. How I would coach through this is I would say, look, which of these 3 items are you most concerned about hitting? So we've got a sales target, we've got a revenue produced target, and we've got a gross profit margin.
Concern, when you say concern, it's not necessarily like which is the most important. It's more like which are you actually worried about the most? Which do you feel is the most likely to miss?
Yeah, which is the hardest to hit exactly. So if we go through that, which one do you want to pick? Sales, revenue, gross profit?
Let's pick gross profit.
Perfect. So gross profit. My next question would be, okay, so what about gross profit do you think is the problem? Because now the way I look at it, we've got basically 3 roads to go down, and we just picked one. I'm like, okay, so let's leave the other ones aside for now. So we're going down the gross profit margin road. And I'm like, okay, so there's a couple things down this road that could be a problem. Subcontractor issues, material, whatever it is, right? So we're going down this road. I'm like, so what in here, and I'm also looking at the budget with them, and I'm like, what about your gross profit margin is concerning you? They go, well, our material cost, it's up like 5% this year, and we don't know why. Okay, so that might be the critical number, right? The critical number is within the number of the gross profit margin. The gross profit margin on its own is too much of a lagging indicator to attack directly. Right? It's too far gone.
It's too big. Yeah.
But if we move it a little bit more
Upstream,
a little bit more upstream, exactly, and we focus on material cost, I'm like, okay, so it's still kind of in the middle. It's not a pure leading indicator, but it's a little bit more upstream, and we could have a little bit more chance to attack that number directly, because now we can talk to our, who's ordering the material. We can look at how the salesmen are estimating the jobs. We can look at the subs that are actually using the materials. Are we paying them based on bundles that they use? Well, now they're incentivized to throw things away, right? So like all these things, it starts to become clearer. How do we attack that number? Gross profit, it's so vast, it's hard to attack that directly. There's so many things inside of it. So once we kind of make that decision, which road are we heading down for this specific quarter, I ask some kind of questions, and usually we come across like, okay, this is the reason why this goal is so difficult to hit. So it simplifies the goal.
So to recap though, you kind of, for a business to find their own leading indicators, they start with the lagging indicators that they want to affect, okay? Yep. Then they look around the conveyor belt and they go, what is upstream of this? What is downstream of this? Okay, if we're going upstream, what are like the most actionable, the most measurable, and the most obvious? You kind of want to shortlist it to a few things. If we're doing the gross profit example, it's basically, let's go with materials. My crews just blow through stuff and I don't understand why. If we were to kind of take it to its final point, do you have an example, or we're just kind of making this up on the fly, but what would be like an actionable leading indicator for the materials thing? Like how might you measure that, or how might you set a goal on that with the member and sort of say, this is the thing to go do that's going to lead to this downstream effect that we want?
So the critical number that we just picked could just simply be the material cost, right, for the quarter. We have to keep material cost under 30%.
Great.
So that in and of itself can just be the critical number. Now that leads to other areas across the company, right? We're talking about how are we estimating? So maybe we're talking with our sales manager about how are we actually estimating these things. Jobs are constantly coming in, overestimated on the materials.
Or underestimated on materials, but yeah.
The production managers, he's getting involved. We're talking about the sub crews. How are we incentivizing the sub crews? Are we paying them based on squares that they install? Are we paying them based on bundles? So it starts to touch other areas. We talk about the person who's actually ordering the material. Are we over ordering and not returning properly? So there's the critical number can simply just be the material cost. And then it starts to touch other things. But the cool thing is, as a company for Q1, we're focusing on keeping our material cost under 30%. The whole company knows that now. Everybody knows that. It's talked about in the team huddle. We're measuring it on a week-by-week basis. Hey guys, last week, we were at 29%. I'm super excited. We're coming in underneath that margin.
Do you think that just the publication, the transparency, the continuous conversating about this one thing in meetings, in emails, in Slack, in impromptu conversations while you're grabbing coffee, like, is that enough to affect the change? Does that do most of the work, or do you often with members need to like drill it down to like an actual activity or something even more granular than that?
So each person that it affects will have like specific things that they're looking at depending on how the business is set up. But what I've found is even just getting to that point where you're talking about it and people are paying attention to it, it's amazing how much that alone does. When you have a scoreboard up on the wall and you're thinking about these things and everyone's looking at it, have you read the book, The One Thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like you're focused on one thing.
It's on the shelf.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. So you get everybody kind of around this one thing, and everybody wants to succeed. Mm-hmm. If you have people in your business that don't want to succeed, you've got other problems. But people in your business want to succeed. And if you're giving them the leading indicator and the critical number to say, this is how we succeed, this is how we get up to that next level, it excites people, especially when you're right. And this is where we get into the development of the leaders in the company, the people that I work with, like the owners. When I'm an owner and I can tell the company, hey, if we focus on this thing, we'll get better. And then we focus on that thing and then we get better.
Yeah.
I'm building this group around me. All the people in the company, they're looking at me, they're going like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And then Q2 comes around and we figure out the critical number, and he goes and tells the team, okay, new critical number for Q2, it's closing ratio. Now we're coming out of the winter season. We have to be closing above 30%. And then we'll hit the sales number. We close above 30%, we hit the sales number. And everyone in the company goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're building up this trust with your team. They're going like, this guy really knows what he's talking about. Because you're not just picking these things out of thin air. You're looking at the data and you're going, we have to hit this number for us to achieve the year. And then you're building that up with the team. They're going like, this guy really understands what he's talking about. And over again, you're succeeding, and they're seeing the success in the lagging metrics that they're used to. They're like, wow, every time he tells us to do this thing, it's giving us a really good result.
What role does your team play in helping you, the owner, and most of our listeners are owners, what role does the team play in helping the owner crack the code, solve the mystery, find the right leading indicator? Are they a good, I'm assuming they're a good feedback loop. They probably have some good ideas and can help you kind of wade through the marsh. Because this is an important point, actually. We talk about numbers and tracking and statistics and ratios all the time. I think something that we kind of don't say enough is like, the hardest thing sometimes about getting into your numbers is that you can look at them any way you want. Like I don't know if anyone remembers taking statistics 1 and statistics 2 in university. Like that's the mystery. Like you can look at them like this, or you can look at them like this. You can tell yourself wildly different stories based off of the same data set, depending on how you do the math and how you like to basically put your lens on it. We had a really great accountant on a couple months ago that explained that whole idea and how businesses often kind of like fudge their numbers when it comes to accounting to look better as a stock price, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my point. We're looking ultimately for truth. We don't want to obfuscate. We don't want to make opaque. We want transparency. Bringing this back to my question, how does the team that you work with play a role in helping you get that moment where it clicks, where you're like, bang, you know what? It's actually not about 100 doors a day. It's about getting as many people off the doorway, off their porch, and having a conversation with me around the side of the house. That's the thing that matters.
So there's a couple things that I want to comment there. Number one, your team can massively help you with it, just to answer your specific question. But the second thing that a lot of people overlook is they think that as the leader of the company, they have to do everything. They have to have all the answers. And there's a bit of an ego that gets involved in reaching out to their team or having a meeting with their team and going like, hey guys, like, here's what I think, but what do you guys think? And the other thing that I love about this concept, and now we're going with this, is actually getting the team involved, is it pushes a lot of owners beyond their comfort zone to have these conversations with their team, which in turn why does it make them uncomfortable?
Yeah.
I think most people want to have all the answers, and they're so uncomfortable telling their team that they don't know, or at least they don't know 100%, that they just refuse to have the conversation.
So owner sees that they have a gross profit margin problem and it's something they want to affect change on. You're saying a lot of people get stuck sort of in a position where they need to know the solution instead of going to their production managers and their finance team and going, hey guys, we have a gross profit margin problem. I'm actually not totally sure why. Do you guys have a take on this? Like, that conversation is a big step for them.
Huge.
Huh.
Yeah. And it's not even that you have to say like, look, I have no idea what I'm doing, because that probably wouldn't be a good thing to say.
Yeah,
that's not true.
That's not what we're saying.
Like, you can take the data to your team and go like, what do you guys see? I know what I see, but what do you guys see? And like, you don't have to come across as like completely oblivious to your business. That would not be a good thing to do. But to have the conversation with your team and say, look, guys, I respect you so much that I want to know what your opinion is. Like, there's a very important way to ask your team what they think, and saying, I have no idea what I'm doing, what do you guys think? Not the right way of doing it. To go to your team and go, here's the data, slide the sheet over, which most people don't even do anyways. They go, here's the data. I know what I see in this, but what do you guys think is the problem? Mm-hmm. And work through that with their team. What it does is it starts to pull people up in the company. Mm-hmm. When they get more information, they start to have more responsibility. People are proud of having the responsibility in the company, and they're proud of being part of solving problems in the business. And they get excited about being a part of that conversation. And you get 6 people's brains working on it instead of just your own.
Yeah, but I mean, but aside from all the fuzzy feelings, you do end up with the right critical number. That's my point. It's like you Joe, Tim, Megan, whoever you are running your business, like you actually don't know what the core issue is, but I'm sure that between the minds of 1 to 3 to 6 people on your team, like they do. So just go ask them. 100%. And so I think that's the role. I think that's the role that they play. Okay,
just one more thing on this. Sure. Just to close out the thought, because the fuzzy feelings, you're totally right. The reason why this circle closes out and why the fuzzy feelings are so valuable, not that the fuzzy feelings are valuable, but when somebody on your team or your team itself discovers what the issue is and sets the target, do you think the buy-in from your team is more or less than if you discovered it and told them what to do?
Yeah, no, it's off the charts.
It's way higher. Mm-hmm. So it comes full circle when you include them in solving the problem and they feel like they actually are a part of it. They're more bought in to the goal anyways, and they're significantly more likely to chase it down. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sure both of us could tell a ton of stories where we've actually set a target ourselves, mm-hmm. or said to somebody, hey, I'm going to do this. And the boss went like, okay, whatever, do it. And we're like, well, I said I would do it. So I'm going to make sure it gets done.
100%.
But if the boss tells you to do it, you're like, okay, whatever, I'll do my best. But when you say that you're going to do it and you discovered it yourself, your responsibility is significantly higher. So you're creating leaders inside of your company that are actually proud of getting this thing done instead of just telling them what to do.
We're going to take a quick pause. We're going to talk about wardrobe. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Lynx Mechanical, owned by Mike and Jen Lammers. Lynx specializes in new home plumbing in the greater Calgary area, and they do over 500 homes a year. So this is a message from Jen. We've been a part of Breakthrough Academy since 2018. Since joining, the growth of Lynx has been huge. We always hovered around $2 million a year and could never break through that glass ceiling of $3 million a year until we started with Breakthrough Academy. Today, we are on track to do over $11 million and growing still. We really took BTA a lot more seriously in 2019, leading into 2020, and even through COVID, we were gaining traction all the way to where we are today. The best part for us were the systems and the processes, which we lacked, as my parents, the founders of Lynx, really never set up Lynx in a manner which left us struggling as we had no proper structure or organization. I can easily say for myself, processes and systems were my holy grail, and Mike really loved the tracking and coaching side, as he loves tough love in a supportive way, of course. Great message. Congrats on the growth, guys. That's really impressive. Thank you, Mike and Jen, for the outfit. And it sounds like you have more swag for me, so send it soon. Pretty cool, hey?
Also just like the best people ever. Like I was with them down in Mexico with Master Circle like a couple months ago, and they're just like the
amazing
nicest people.
They're
just the best.
They're in Master Circle now.
Yeah.
Where were we? Okay, so we just kind of talked through this idea of start with your lagging and move towards your leading. Can you sort of zoom out for us and then explain how we sort of drill these into our overall critical numbers and the goals of the organization as a whole?
So how the critical number fits in with the leading and lagging indicators simply is that the lagging indicator is the result that we're looking for. The leading indicator is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. And we want the critical number to just be a little bit more upstream or a little bit more on the leading indicator side than just the lagging indicator. So an example would be like if the sales target is something that you're trying to look for, the sales goal itself is not the critical number. We already have that up top. And
for our non-Breakthrough Academy listeners, just explain what a critical number is in the first place. Let's define that.
So the critical number is one single number that you're trying to achieve in a quarter that by achieving it has a significant impact across the entire business.
Domino effect.
A domino effect.
Okay.
Yeah. It's it's
the one thing. It's the core focus. Okay, cool. Yeah. So with that out of the way, you're making the case that it is better to make more numbers that are more leading, more upstream versus downstream or versus lagging. Do you have any like colorful examples or memories you can think of where it's like, hey, we set it as this lagging indicator, we changed it to this leading indicator, and it worked better?
Tons. I mean, probably too many to even remember. But specifically, Dan Young's been on the show. Joe Mullins, also awesome guy that I've worked with a long time. They both have had just absolutely incredible growth. And when they first came into BTA, they came in about 5.5 years ago. They were much more focused on the lagging indicator side, not because they were being difficult or whatever. They just didn't know any better for the most part. And when you start to change these things, the impact it has on the business is quite dramatic. So when you shift this to like, instead of a sales target, a closing ratio, right? It has a massive impact. So because I've been doing this for so long and with so many people, like there's so many times that this has happened, usually it's the like sales target getting switched to like just like a closing ratio or like a lead conversion ratio. But like some of these guys have grown from like Dan Young was like 4 million up to like 17 in like a couple of years. Like Joe went from like 5, I think, to 28 last year. So wow. Like and it's not just from that, but it simplifies the communication to the team instead of it just being like everything all the time. If you can tell your team, guys, this is the most important thing this quarter, it simplifies and distills that down to just a way simpler way of communicating it to your team. So,
What will an entrepreneur begin to notice if they go from purely lagging to both lagging and leading? They dial these into their critical numbers. They over communicate it to their team. What will they notice in terms of the results in their business, the vibe around the building, the feedback they get from their team, even their customers?
Simply put, it has a bigger impact on the lagging indicators. So that will be like the most obvious thing that you notice, is that by fixing, for example, your lead conversion, you have more appointments and you have more sales. Like it has an immediate impact on the lagging indicator as long as you've chosen the right one. But the less obvious things is that you actually gain the ability to be a better leader across your company because your communication with your team is so much clearer. So I'd say the more obvious things are with the numbers, that the lagging indicators just simply get better. The less obvious things are you're having better conversations with your team's more bought in, and you have an easier time to influence your team as to what the direction of the company actually is. Those are a little bit harder to measure, but I'd say equally as important.
The team has much more concrete action steps and a lot less confusion around what it is they're expected to do.
Totally. This gets into employment agreements and deliverables, which you don't have time to go into today. This kind of touches a couple different things, but simply put, it gives people a simpler direction to run.
Yeah, I love it. Brayden, let's leave it at that, man. I really, really appreciate the time today. Come in again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Benji.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Contractor Evolution. If you've already subscribed to our channel, consider sharing this episode with another contractor who you think needs to hear it.